Thank you so much for tuning in today. It should be a wonderful day. We're going to start out with a little presentation here, so let me get that up on the screen. If you are here, don't hesitate, say hi in chat, let me know you're here. If you have any questions at any point, you can drop it down in the chat there. This episode is going to be focused on markers inside of Final Cut Pro and how to use them, and hopefully utilize them in your workflow. In addition to markers, we're going to cover a couple other things. So this episode and really all the episodes, I like to break them up into 3 sections. We'll start out talking about the marker types, and we'll show a little bit in this presentation. Then we'll move on to a demo, and I'll actually dive into Final Cut, use it live with you guys so you can see it and actually use it in real life situations with real clips. We'll build some projects. And then I have received a bunch of questions recently, and I'm seeing some good ones also asked on the various Final Cut forums and groups. So, like with previous streams, we'll end the stream today with a Q&A that'll actually probably take up most of this stream. I think I have 9 really good questions, and if you have any, don't hesitate. Again, like I said earlier, leave them in the chat there. As a little bit of a side note, this is live, and this is something that we're doing for the first time, which is running this stream off a machine running macOS Mojave, the recent operating system released by Apple, 10.14. So it is very new. It's a 0.0 update, 10.14.0. So this is the first one. I would imagine there are glitches with it. I have not found many. But if you notice anything weird on your end with the stream or anything else that you see, don't hesitate. Let me know in the chat. If you're watching this on replay later on, that's cool too. Send me a message. I always want to know how to improve. So that's going to be the summary there. As a little side note, if you are looking for tools to help your workflow, I recommend Frame.io. And you can get a free 30-day trial of Frame.io by using this link. This is my referral link. I'm not being paid by Frame.io at all. I just have used this tool to work with some people on some projects in New York. I'm based in Los Angeles, and this Frame.io tool works really well with Final Cut for sharing out projects and media. You can put up a whole bunch of raw media onto this Frame.io server. It's very user-friendly. So if you haven't used it, strongly recommend it. And if you do decide to use it, use this link and you'll get a free 30-day trial. So you can try it out, see if it's what you actually want to use. After the trial, I believe they're still doing this where you can continue on a free account that has less storage space, but it gives you more time to practice with the tool and using it. So hopefully Frame.io is something you can work into your workflow, but if you're doing anything collaboratively with others, this is a great tool to use. And I'll put the link up later on as well, just if you need it. So let's get into what today's all about, which is markers. So what is a marker? Markers are reference points that can be placed within a clip to locate, identify, annotate, and even navigate to specific points in a project or in a clip. So that's what markers are. And a lot of people look at this and they think locating, identifying, even annotation, it may not be something that you would use in your regular workflow, but we're going to show a couple examples that may actually let you use this and help out with what you're using. And if you're new to Final Cut, or maybe you're not the primary editor, you may see these markers used on a project, and you may have just glanced over them, not even recognized that they were useful tools there, because they are very subtle. So these markers can be used in a few different ways, because we looked at briefly an overview of what they would do, but I frequently edit videos that are captured from multiple angles, and markers can be placed on a specific frame, like say a flash from a photographer's camera, or a clapping sound, if you've ever seen in films, the clapper that they use that has all the scene information. One of the main reasons for clapping that down is so that they have a really loud noise at a specific spot, and visually and using the audio, they can sync it up. So you can use this to sync sound effects and even multiple angles together. Another way to use markers in this in Final Cut in editing as well. So you can give a note to another editor or even someone else, say, hey, look at this point, look at this point. I want you to check on these clips to see if they're correct, or add really any note you want in there. Now, in my opinion, I like using to-do markers for that. So you can also create to-do items and even have a really nice to-do list that's built into Final Cut. And you can see, okay, I need to fix this edit, fix this edit. A lot of times I'll send a project to sometimes another editor, but sometimes it's just a producer or it's another person on the team that needs to review the content, and then they want to make notes on it. So they can actually create these to-do items as notes. And then when they send it back to me, I can see all those markers, and I can go through and check them off as I'm completing each of those tasks. So to-do items is another way you can use markers. And then one of the final types of markers is a chapter marker. So if you're thinking of a DVD or a Blu-ray disc that you'd put into a player and watch on a TV screen, if you add chapter markers in Final Cut, those will then show up as chapters on your final project. These chapters can also show up in iTunes movies, and digitally they can be used as well. So markers are classified into kind of 4 separate types of markers. So what do they actually look like on your timeline? So here's a picture of the 4 marker types. And the first one is our blue, or I think it's more purple. What do you think? Is it blue or purple? I think in the earlier versions it was more blue. To my eyes, it's now looking more purple. So I would just call them purple markers, but the manual says blue. So these blue markers are standard markers. You can add a title to them, a name for those markers, but that's kind of all that they do. They just sit there on the timeline, and that's their mark. If you do have a to-do item, those will show up as red. And to-do items that are red are not completed items. So they're very similar to the normal markers, but the red ones are actually need to be completed. They haven't been checked off as completed. Whereas a green one is still a to-do item, but it's a completed to-do item. So someone has gone in and checked the box that says they've completed that task. And then the final one is our orange one here, which is a chapter marker. And chapter markers can be a little bit confusing because obviously you can see there on the screen there's 2 points to the chapter marker, and especially if you're new to Final Cut, a lot of people get confused by that other thing that's to the right of the marker, which is that pin that you can drag around. And with chapter markers, on most DVDs that have a chapter list, a lot of times you'll see a still image representing that chapter. And that's what this little pin is for. That's actually marking the still frame that's going to show up for that chapter and represent that. So the pin you can kind of ignore. You don't have to use that. But if you do use that, that's just setting a frame. The most important thing is the actual orange marker that's in the circle there. That is the marker. That's the point of the chapter. So that's kind of an overview of what markers look like. So let's get into a demo here and actually see it inside of Final Cut. So let me exit my Keynote. And this is Final Cut Pro 10. So if you're using an earlier version, a really old version, like 7 or earlier, it's going to look very different. And you should upgrade, in my opinion, to 10 at this point. But we're going to go through a couple things in this demo. I want to show some very basic maneuvers around Final Cut with markers and adding them and what you can do with them. So to start out, let me go up here. I have a markers project. Yeah, here it is. And I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm actually going to remove this because that shows my final project. And I'm also going to mute here the computer so my headphones don't go wild. We can actually slow this down. Okay, so here's this clip, right? This is, I'll just play this here. This is just a clip of some fireworks, pretty straightforward, going off. Nothing too fancy, nothing too, complicated there. And let me make sure. Yeah, just making sure you guys can hear me. Yes, the audio is going through the way it should be. Okay, so with this clip here, we have the fireworks going off, and this was recorded probably, I would say maybe a mile or so away from where the fireworks are actually happening. So if we look at the audio waveforms down at the bottom here, we can see right in here, if I play this, there's the 2 fireworks going off. But on our timeline, notice here the waveform, the audio waveform is way over here because that's actually where the pops happen for the fireworks. That's where the camera hears that audio. And this is a place where we're going to use markers to put in a sound effect and sync up the sound to it. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to first go over and find where those ones explode. So right about here, we can see I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard, just going frame by frame. This is where those fireworks go off. And for this example, I'm just going to focus on this one that's going off that's kind of on the upper left compared to the lower one. Just the upper left one we're going to add the sound for. So right there, it's going off, and right where it explodes, I'm going to hit the M key on the keyboard. And pressing the M key adds that marker. You see, there's our marker on the timeline. And this light gray area, hopefully you can see that on the stream here, this light gray area represents an entire frame. So I'm pretty zoomed in here. So it put it onto this frame on the side. If I don't want it there, if I actually want it over a frame, I'm just going to double click on this marker to open up the information. I'm going to hit the delete key to remove that marker. Then I can move down here, and we'll press the M key again, and there we have the marker right where it's actually, the fireworks actually exploding. So that's one way to add a marker, just pressing the M key on the keyboard. And that's the way I would recommend using and adding markers. You can certainly go up to the menu bar here and go to the Mark menu, and then go down to Markers. And under this Markers submenu, we do see abilities here to do all kinds of things with the marker, including the Add Marker command. And to the right of this, just like any command in the menu bar, you can see the shortcut. It's just the M key. So in our case, we're going to just be using the M key in this stream just because it's much easier to add markers. But if you want to add them, just click on Add Marker in the menu bar. You can certainly do that as well. But markers is something I use very frequently, so get used to using the M key to add those markers. So that's a way to add the marker, and here I did it in the timeline. But let me show you something else. I'm going to control click on this clip in the timeline, and I'm going to say Reveal in Browser. By choosing Reveal in Browser, it's going to go and find that clip in our browser up at the top here. So here you can see the original clip is 2010 4th of July, and it's this little part in here. But notice here in the 2010 clip, I don't see that marker added to this clip. And that's because if you add a marker to the clip on the timeline, it's not going to be reflected in the browser. Okay, so just to make that clear, adding markers down in your project or your timeline does not add them to the original clip. So you can add markers all over a project and they won't be kind of saved or transferred to other areas of your projects or of your clips, wherever else you use them. So if you want, you can certainly go in and add markers up here in the browser. So if you have something that's important for a clip, maybe a note that you want to add that says anywhere this clip is used, make sure to add a subtitle and make sure to put the person's name that's shown in the clip to give them credit. You could add that marker up here in the browser doing the same exact thing. So I can go on here, I'm just going to press the M key, kind of a random spot there. And then I'm going to hit I and O to select that portion of the clip, and I'm going to drag this down onto the timeline. I'm going to do Shift Z to zoom out, and notice this marker that I added up in the browser is also then added down onto the timeline. It follows that clip. So that's a distinction and a question I've received over, not recently, but I have received in the past, where they say they've added all these markers and now they're all gone. They don't know where they went. Well, if you've added those markers in the timeline, that's the only place you're going to see them. They won't travel with the clip. So just keep that in mind when you're adding your markers onto the clips there. So that's adding that. I'm going to get rid of this second clip because we don't need it. Our point is we're making we're going to add a sound effect here. So I'm going to go into the sound effects library over here in our second browser, into the audio sidebar. Sorry, not the browser. The audio sidebar, I'm going to go to sound effects, and we're going to look for fire, because I believe there is a firework somewhere in here. Yeah, there we got one. We don't need the balloons blowing up. We'll use this firework, and I'm just going to grab one of these explosions here and bring it down. So now I've added this second clip, this fireworks clip, to the timeline. I know the fireworks sound goes off right here, so I'm going to hit the M key on the keyboard. With my skimmer right there, it adds the marker to that point where I can see that the firework is going off. And then without doing too much, I can drag this over and my snapping is turned off. Let me turn snapping on. That's this little button where you can press the N key on the keyboard, because snapping is what makes this really helpful. Because now if I drag this over with snapping turned on, notice that yellow line, it actually snaps those two markers together to show that those are clipped up or synced. So now if I were to play this, the firework sound is going to go off right when that firework is exploding. So that's a way you can use markers to sync clips in the here in the project. So that's a very simple way to use markers, and I didn't do too much with them. I just added them. If I don't want these markers here anymore, I can just double click on them. Brings the marker information. Just gonna hit delete, double click the marker, and hit delete to remove that marker out of it. So that's a way you can use markers to sync clips together, sync sound effects. If you have other angles, all kinds of stuff you can do with just the standard normal marker. And yeah, so then let me do another thing here. I'm going to delete the fireworks clip. I'm going to go back to my fireworks and just add these ones, because we have 3 markers added to this clip. And you can see the 3 markers on there. I'm going to hit the index button. This goes to the timeline index. If you've not used the timeline index before, one way that you can use them is for navigating around your project. And if I go to the tags, just clicking on tags here section, I can see the 3 markers right here, but at the bottom you could just click on this little marker option, and this will show you the 3 markers that have been added. And I can actually see in the order that I've added them, marker 3 is physically the first one that shows up in the order there. Marker 1's the middle one, and 2 is the last one there. So this is a way to navigate between markers. You can just use the arrows on the keyboard just up and down when you're over on the side here to navigate between them. Really great way to get between any types of markers on there. Then on the left side, you can just click on the names. So this is marker 3, but I can just click here in the timeline index and change this. So if this is actually going to be marker 1, I'll call it marker 1. I can go down here and rename marker 2, same way, just using the timeline index on the side. And it's the same thing. You can just double click on a marker and you'll see the marker name, and we could change that marker name right here in the little pop-up for that marker. Cool, so that's one way to navigate between the markers, is using the timeline index. You can also use the mark menu. Just like, I'm going to show you all the shortcuts because I think that's the better way to do that. But you can use the mark menu, and you can say that you want to navigate between the markers. And did they move it? Oh, they moved it down here. Okay, so it's under mark, and then you have previous and next, and then marker. But again, that's really buried in the menus here, so I recommend using the shortcuts. So you have the control apostrophe, and that'll move you to the next marker. And then you have control, what is that, semicolon, control semicolon, and control colon. That'll get you between the markers. So you can navigate around them using the semicolon and the apostrophe to get between those markers. All right, so that's a way to navigate between them. And then marker type's a big thing. So we've just added the standard marker, but if you double click on a marker, or you can be on the marker and you can use the shortcut option M, and that'll open up the marker as well. And these are the marker types. So we talked about this earlier during the keynote, but here's the 3 types of markers. We have the first one, which is the standard blue, or in my opinion, purple marker. Then the middle ones are to-do item. So I'm going to change this to a to-do item. And what you'll notice is only one little thing changed here. I'm going to switch it back to a normal marker and then switch it over. In addition to the color change, we can see now it has a completed checkbox. So this is a to-do marker. You could say that we need to color correct this. So I'm just going to type in color correct. And so that would be it. We can have that marker there, color correct it, and it's great. And then in our tags on the timeline index, at the bottom, we actually have a specific category here for our incompleted to-do items. And we can see here it is the color correct. I need to get that completed. I can click right on it, jumps to that point, And then if I click on the box there, it checks it off. Or you could double click on the marker here and check off the completed box. And then those completed to-do items turn green. That lets us know we're completed and we're done. And I mentioned earlier Frame.io. One thing that's really nice about Frame.io is you can actually go on there and watch a video and take notes at specific points on the project. And those notes in the video that you're watching can then be downloaded and imported here into Final Cut as a list of to-do items. So those to-do items are able to be brought over right from someone else. So you don't have to go through and add all these markers after the fact from someone's notes. You can just have them take the notes on Frame.io. You can see them on the website there and then import them right here into Final Cut, which is a cool way to use that application. So that's how we change the marker type, just using this little menu at the top. And the third and last type of marker here is our chapter marker. So let me switch over projects, because as great as the fireworks are, I'm getting kind of bored of them. So let's switch over to another one. And let's see, this one looks like a little longer one. Yeah, this is our koalas. Yeah, we'll use the koalas, that's fine. So with the koala project here, I have a couple markers that are just to-do items, but maybe I want to break this up into two different chapters. Because I have the first chapter, it's a couple of normal koalas, and then let's move this one over to the end, because then we have the baby koalas towards the end, the cuter ones. So we'll add that and make that two chapters. So right here at the beginning, I'm going to press M twice on the keyboard to bring up the marker menu, and then I'm going to click the Add Chapter Marker. And this is actually going to be Chapter 1. And I'll just type in Chapter 1, hit Done, and then we'll go to the end here, and I'm going to do MM, bring up the marker menu, and this will be Chapter 2. Obviously, you could go in and type in any names for these chapters at any point. I'm just using generic names there. And then, like I said before, notice that the orange little marker, that's all that's left. But if I click on the marker, then I see this little pin. I'm going to zoom in here. And what the pin is, this is for setting a thumbnail image for the chapter. So right now, if we were to export this and we were just looking at the chapter lists that are generated automatically by applications, they would use this picture here because that's what the chapter marker is set to. But I could just click and drag this pin to a different part of the project, or maybe an earlier picture if there was a different one I wanted to use. In this case, I like the second picture of this chapter probably the best. So I'm going to drag it to that one. And that's what this line is with the pin. That's all it is the thumbnail image. It really doesn't have a huge effect or any effect to your project. It's just how this video is going to show up in other applications when you go to export it. So that is those are the markers. That's changing them. We looked at the timeline index over here as a way to search your different types of markers. So you can see all of your standard markers. If you have to-do items or completed to-do items, you'll see those. And then the chapter markers as well are there. And you can use this as a way to navigate around your project, especially if you're working on either a documentary or a longer form project. Having markers can make it a lot easier to navigate around your project. So the other couple things I want to do is now look at just modifying and working a little bit with the markers, because this can be a little confusing if you've never used them before. Let's say this standard marker here, I want to move this. Unlike any of your clips, like we can click and drag this clip to rearrange them, but the marker itself I cannot click on and drag left or right. What we actually have to do is just double click on the marker to activate it or to see it. And on the keyboard, I'm going to do, we can't do it when we're in titling it, because otherwise we're going to cut that text. So we do have to do it as a, or if you have a mouse that is a right click or a trackpad, you can do a 2-finger push, just your secondary click, and then you can choose cut. Cuts that marker, and if we want to put it maybe on this clip, I can go over here, and I'm going to do just the normal Command V for paste, and that pastes that marker right to that point. So that's how you move a marker. And you can see earlier when I put the marker on just a frame earlier on the fireworks, I just double clicked on the marker to open it, deleted that marker, and then went somewhere else, went to the next frame to add the marker again. But if you've added a bunch of notes to the marker, it's a to-do item, and you don't want to lose that information. Just control click or right click on it, cut the marker, and then you can go and paste it to another spot. So that's how you can move things around. Same way you can copy and paste a marker. I'm not going to demo that. Just do a normal copy paste. Control click on it, copy the marker, and then Command V, you can paste it wherever you want. The other part on here, you can bump a marker a couple frames at a time. So this is probably what I should have done earlier when I was looking at the firework and it was just on the wrong frame. You can, with a marker selected, you can use the keyboard to bump the marker or to nudge it one frame at a time. And you're going to do that just by pressing Control period or Control comma. So the two keys right below the L and the semicolon. So Control comma is the first one that bumps it or nudges it one frame to the left, and then Control period nudges or bumps it one frame to the right. So if you're really close, if you did what I did earlier with the firework, just use the Control, in that case it would have been Control period to move it one frame to the right. So that's the way you can nudge markers around. And then the other thing that I saw, because someone else wanted to modify markers, this actually was posted today. Thomas posted this today in the Final Cut Pro 10 Editors Facebook group. He posted a question simply saying he wanted to know how to move markers from a timeline and put them into a multicam clip. So he wanted to essentially move all these markers that he had added and put them somewhere else that's not on the clips themselves. So unfortunately, if you were going to do that, you could go through and cut these markers and then switch over to the multicam clip or the other project or anywhere else. And that would be one way to do that. But if your workflow has you using markers and you want to move these things around, what I'm going to recommend doing, and this is what was recommended online as well, was adding in either an adjustment layer or a generator to do this, to create this. So I want to show what this looks like. First, I'm going to show the final suggestion, and this may be the easier way because it's built in. But if you go over to your generators, you can select one of your color generators. So let's just say like a white layer, for example. I'm going to drag this layer onto the timeline, and I can drag this all the way across the entire project here. With the clip selected, I can go up to the video inspector here and just take the opacity down to 0. So essentially, this white video layer is an invisible layer. And what is suggested essentially is instead of putting all your markers right on the clips, you can then place your markers up here. I'm just going to re-add each of the markers. And with snapping turned on, this is actually pretty easy. I can then go in and change these to the chapter markers. And now what I have is I have this clip that I can move and copy and paste into another project to save those markers. So I'm going to cut this with Command X just to remove it from this project. I can then switch over to another project, say my multicam project. I could double click to go into that multicam clip, for example, if I wanted to, and I could paste this as another layer. Usually what I would recommend doing is having this set as an adjustment layer. So this way we did it as a generator, which is built into Final Cut, but now I'm going to show you how to do it as an adjustment layer. And instead of just diving in and showing you how to create one manually, if you go over to my website, which is anawesomeguide.com, and click on the downloads page, you can go here and just download an adjustment layer template. So just click on the download adjustment layer template. It takes you to my Dropbox folder. Click on adjustment layer, and here's the adjustment layer. We're actually going to download this file, and that's what we're going to bring into Final Cut. So let me go back one. Yeah, this is the one we want to download. So at the top right here, just click download, direct download. Don't need to save it to Dropbox. And I might have locked up Final Cut here with doing the paste there. So I'm going to force quit Final Cut, and we'll go back into it. But before I do that, so I've downloaded the adjustment layer file from my website, and here you can see that adjustment layer. And this adjustment layer is just a motion template. So you can actually put this into your movies folder. So in your, I like to use column view personally, but in your home folder, you have a movies folder, and that has your motion templates. And this is just a title template. So we're just going to drag it into the title here as adjustment layer, and that'll install it. Sometimes you do need to quit and reopen Final Cut to actually make this template show up. If you have any questions about that, I do have instructions on the website, so when you go there, you'll see all of those. But now, this adjustment layer template, what's different about it comparing it to using that generator, because the generator is fine, you can certainly add your markers to that and then move that clip around to put the marker somewhere else. But the problem with it, I like to use usually very thick titles and thumbnails here. So like with this one, you can see these clips are huge on the timeline. And I could go up here and shrink it down if I wanted to, but a lot of times I'm demoing and I like to have really big clips on the timeline. But now in my titles page, I've created the adjustment layer. Let's see if it came in. I don't see it there. Let's search for it. I think I have to add one more folder. Oh no, there it is. Just doing a search for adjustment layer. So there's my adjustment layer. And essentially the adjustment layer here is an empty title. So I can do the same thing. I've added it to the timeline and then I extended it to the entire length of the timeline. So now, just like we did before, I can use the markers. I can put them all on the same spots. I can go in and change these to chapter markers instead of standard markers. And now instead of having a huge, large generator clip, I have the adjustment layer that has those markers, and I can move them around or put them into another project, which can be very useful, especially if you have multiple versions of a single project. You can add these markers onto maybe version 1 of the project and copy and paste this over in version 2, and the markers will stay the same as you go. So I saw that question from Thomas, and I'm sure he's not watching this, but I saw he got the answer on there on that group. So you don't hesitate to use those Facebook groups and other ways to ask questions. It's a great way to do that. And then we've seen removing markers. In most cases, I've gone on to a marker. Let me get rid of the adjustment layer. I've gone to a marker, just double-clicked on it, and then said delete marker. But you can also, when you're on a marker and you've navigated it to it, you can go up to the mark menu and do this as well. But you can say Control-M, and that deletes that marker. So again, I'm going to add it again. There's the purple marker. Control-M deletes that marker. In addition to that, I'm going to hit I way over here. I'm going to go over here and hit O to select an out point. And notice I have all this region or range here selected. One thing you can do is go up to markers, and you have an option to delete markers in the selection. So that's a way you can delete multiple markers at one time. Make the selection on the timeline, which I did using I and O to set an in and an out point. And then markers, delete markers in a selection. And if you do this a lot, Control-Shift-M is the shortcut for that, to do that. Cool. So that is what I have to say about markers. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed out on, and I don't think there is. I mean, that's I put out a lot of information, but really markers are very simple and straightforward. But just know that they are a very powerful way to add notes and add points to your project, and strongly recommend getting used to and trying them out. So that's the demo, and now we're going to move on to the Q&A. These are just going to be not necessarily anything related to markers, just various questions that people have asked or that I've seen posted on places that I thought were worth talking about, worth chatting about. So first one we have here is the person says, hi, how do I convert a landscape, which is a 1920 by 1080 or a 16 by 9 video, on the timeline to vertical for mobile? So this is a question I've gotten so many times recently because vertical video is taking over thanks to Instagram. If you use IGTV, Instagram TV, or even Instagram stories, any of those, all of them are going to the non-traditional format of being vertical video, which if you have your iPhone or another smartphone, when you're holding it, usually you're going to be holding it with one hand in the vertical mode, and that's why everything's going that way. So it's very common to want to take a project and convert it for that format. So I'm actually going to we'll use this same project, that's these koalas here. And this is all need to cut something out or add in black bars. And here's what I mean by that. The way you're going to do this is first find your project in the project browser, which in my case it's this YouTube Final Cut Help project. And you can go up to Edit, and there's an option to duplicate the project and also duplicate a snapshot. And this is going to be the first step. You could certainly convert this project to be vertical if you want to, but you're probably going to want to keep the vertical version and get or keep the horizontal version and get a vertical version. So that's why I recommend duplicating the project. But also, if something weird happens, you can just go back to the original and reduplicate it. I also usually recommend duplicating it as a snapshot. This will just help if you have multicam clips and other things. It just keeps the two projects completely separated and unlinked from each other. So then duplicate a snapshot. I'm just going to call this vertical, just for sake here. And we're going to double click on the project. Here it is. Looks exactly the same because it is exactly the same. So the next part you're going to want to do is to convert this. So in our vertical, or in our project here, we're going to click on the project to select it, just a single click. And in the inspector on the right side here, we have the information about this video. We can see it's 1920 by 1080, and right now it's a 23:8 project. That's our frame rate. And we're going to want to modify this and change it because we want it to be 1080 by 1920. That'll give us our vertical video. So I'm going to hit modify, and here's our video. Here's the format that we got, and we can see 1080, which is great, but if we go to resolution, there's not an option for 1080 by 1920. So in this case, I'm actually going to go down to custom, and we're going to get a custom format for 1080, just switching them by 1920. My guess is in the future they're going to add a format for this, so it'll just be a preset. The other thing too, I believe with Instagram stuff, they want you to be 30 frames per second, so you probably have to create a new project from scratch to get that, but that's fine. We'll just keep it like that for now. And then I'm going to hit OK. And what you're going to notice is almost instantly here, we have gray areas on the left and the right side. It's not black. It's not invisible. Just gray areas. And then our video is in the middle, all of our koala pictures. Here's the problem. You can see some of these are cropped really weird because they were vertical before and they were fitting great, but now that they were horizontal before. But now that we've converted them into this vertical portrait view, they're not looking great. So this is where you're going to need to go through and figure out how you want to tackle vertical video. Some people go in and they're going to select all their clips, basically the entire project, and they're going to make a new compound clip. And we'll just call it our vertical clip, is fine. And after they do that, they select the video and they go and scale it down. So they scale it way down so that it fits just in a certain frame. And unfortunately, these are all still images, so they're all cropped at different points. So you can see how frustrating it is with this vertical part to deal with that because they don't fit the way that they're supposed to. So this is one way. If you have all video, by doing this, they're all going to come out like this, where you'll have the black videos on the top and the bottom, or the black area, just empty space. So that's one way to do it. You can look at the other videos on my channel. I've talked about how to fill in that space and to kind of utilize that. But you may just want to go through and completely re-edit this video and adjust each of the frames individually so that they fit in a way that looks good on vertical video. If you know that that's going to be your output, I would recommend just editing the whole thing in vertical. But you can see how it is tough, especially with these photos. I'm having to like completely rotate it to get the two in there. It's tough dealing with vertical video. But don't hesitate. It's okay to leave black in the space and maybe fill it in with another background or something else that's there. But essentially, to summarize, to convert your current video into vertical, just duplicate the project, and then with the project selected, click the Modify button and change the video resolution. The format's going to be custom, and the resolution should be 1080 by 1920, or a reverse of whatever you had there before. If you were using maybe a 720 project where the resolution is 1280 by 720, just flip those, make it 720 by 1280, and you'll get that vertical video. So the other part of it, you could do 1080 by 1080. I've seen a lot of people wanting to do square videos. That's something else you can see in some of my other videos. That's something you can do as well. So, Steve, thank you so much for commenting in the chat there. You say great video, and you've used the markers for exporting out some frame. And yeah, that's actually a great call there. So if you go up to the share menu and you go down and you can share here with like a master file or something else, you'll see in some of these share options, they actually reference the marker options for what you share out. And with roles and other stuff, you can do that in there with those clips. So that's a great call as well. Markers are used all over the place. So our second question here, this actually came from a Creative Cow form. They said, I've just moved from Avid, and if you don't know, Avid is another very advanced video editing application, pro app like Final Cut or Adobe Premiere. These are some of the top video editing applications. So they said, I've moved from Avid, and when I mark up a range and hit delete, it lifts the mark selection. How do I get it to delete the selection and get the two sides to join? So let me switch over to a different project just because I want to see some different clips. And what about the river clips? The river clips are fun. There are stills here. So what this person is talking about, their timeline might be set up a couple different ways, but essentially, if you're used to Final Cut, you're probably used to, at least Final Cut 10, you're probably used to the magnetic timeline, where, say this picture here with the train, if I click on this picture and I hit the delete key, when I delete it, notice how those two clips join together. That's what the magnetic timeline does. That's the idea. You hit delete and everything comes together and everything links around and everything's magnetic. So what's essentially happening is when this person's deleting the clip, it's doing something like this. They're deleting it, and it's leaving a gap. It's not connecting those clips together. So there's a few reasons that can happen. The first reason, I'm going to zoom in here, is that you are on the magnetic timeline, just like I am here, and you're doing function delete to delete something. And I'm on one of the more narrow keyboards, but if you have one of the extended keyboards, there's actually two delete keys. There's your normal delete key that's up next to the like return key or next to the equals key. And then there's the smaller delete key, which is essentially deleting, if you were to delete in text, it's deleting the letter in front of versus deleting the letter behind the blinking cursor. So this could be happening because you're hitting the function delete key or the smaller delete key on the keyboard, and it's deleting in a way where it's leaving the gap instead of using the magnetic timeline. So that's one reason that this can happen. I was thinking about it, and that may be the case, but most likely what's happening is instead of deleting something that's on the primary storyline, you've probably gone in and added another clip. I'm just going to add this museum clip here, this still image. You've probably gone in here and you've marked a selection. I'm going to hit I. Actually, let's use the range tool. So I'm going to select a spot here on the clip and hit delete. So you've probably done something like this, where it's a connected clip and you've selected that range in the middle. I mean, do undo. We have a range in the middle selected, and then you push the delete key. That's very standard behavior because we're not on a storyline. We're not on the primary storyline or a second one, so they're not going to connect together. And that's what's going to happen. So if you want them to bring up the secondary menu and say create storyline, and if you do this a lot, learn the shortcut Command G. So by doing that, you might notice this little gray outline on the top. This creates our storyline. Now I can get my range selection tool, select a spot, and hit delete. And notice they connect together because they are in a storyline. And they're going to use the same functions that are happening on the magnetic timeline on our primary storyline. They're happening in that storyline as well. So hopefully that answered that question. The third question here is how to create a slide over text with a background like this video. Okay, so this was actually a fun one. I'm gonna actually play the video that this person had. I just have to bring up the link here. Thanks for bearing with me. They saw this video on Twitter. We're gonna go over here and we're gonna play this video. Muted. Okay, perfect. So notice this text in the middle of this video. Down here at the bottom with 0 environment impact, see how these are sliding over from the side, but they're also not completely sliding over from the side. They're kind of in their own little groups here. So this person just wants to recreate these lines, what they're seeing here with the text and the background as well. A couple things to note about this video, or these text lines, is each of the text lines are their own boxes, right? So they're not all one size rectangle. Each of the backgrounds are their own thing, and they're also moving at separate times. So like in these cases, the Riverside, California, the first line moved over first, then the second, then the third line. So we're just going to try to recreate this text here. And again, this is a great way to get better at editing videos and working with them. If you can see examples of stuff that happened on a clip and you just want to recreate it, and it's a great way to do it. Just challenge yourself and see if you can do that. And there are certainly templates online and out there that can do this in less steps, but this is a way to do it with stuff that's just built into Final Cut Pro 10 here. So the first thing I'm going to do is add our text, our titles. And I'm just going to go up to the titles and generators sidebar. And in my titles, I'm going to get rid of my search. We don't need the adjustment layer anymore. And in here, I'm just going to use the basic title. And all of this, you can certainly go into more detail, but just for time's sake, I'm going to add my titles here. And with this title, let's see, I'm going to use the inspector. We'll adjust this a little bit. I'm going to make this a bold title. Increase the size a little bit just to make it easier for you guys to see it. And this will be line 1. Whoop, there we go. That might be a little too big. We'll prop it down there. Okay, so that gives me the format of the text that I want to use. And on the keyboard, I'm going to hold Option and just drag this title up to create a second line. I'm going to do the same thing again to create a third line. We'll do 3 separate lines here. So with the middle layer of text selected, I'm going to go up and say this is line 2. And we'll put info at the end just to make it a little bit different size there. And then third layer of text, same thing. This is line 3. And this is information. Cool. So that creates our layers of text. I'm going to go up to the View menu and turn on the titles and action safe zones. These put these little yellow lines. I bet you can't even really see that on the, maybe on the trains here. Yeah, we can see that. These are just guides for you. It's less important with digital media nowadays because screens don't cut off as much information, but it's still strongly encouraged that you keep text that you're going to be reading inside this inner line, this inner title safe zone. So I have this up. I'm going to use the transform tool on the left here to rearrange these. So I'm just going to bring my line 3. We'll say these are down at the bottom. Here's line 2. Roughly lining them up, maybe a little bit more space. And then line 1. We'll go and line that up. Cool. So that gives us the 3 lines. Now I want to create the background for each of these lines of text. Actually, in the example video, it was, I believe, black text with a white background. So in our text here, if you scroll down to the face section, I can open up face just by hitting the show button on the right. Click on the white color. Let me move my color palette over here. And now I'll just drag that down to black. And again, with all 3 layers of text selected, I can change that very easily for all layers of text without having to do it 1 layer at a time. Cool, so that creates our layers there. And then I'm going to go over to the generators, just on the titles and generators sidebar under generators. And we have our different options for what we want to put down. And there is a whites generator. So I'm actually going to grab whites and bring it over here. It has to go below the titles, the 3 titles that we see here. And for the white, I'm going to make it a pure white or bright white instead of a smoky white. There's all kinds of different whites you can go in here and select and change. But I think they used kind of a bright white there, so I like that one. And now in the inspector, I'm going to go over to the video inspector. And you can use the tool, but I like using the inspector for this. I'm going to use the crop tool to adjust the crop. So I'm just adjusting the crop. We're doing line 1 here, so I'm cropping it in just around the text. All right, pretty straightforward there, just creating a little line of text. And now I can just hold Option, just like I did with the titles, and drag on this titles to make additional copies. So I've made the copies, and then I'm going to use the inspector to move them. I'm just adjusting the position to move this down. I want to make sure that they do touch, so that there's a little bit of overlap with the color, so that there's no little weird lines or gaps, because that's not what the other video did, because we're trying to recreate that. And then same thing, going to move the third line here. Try to keep it centered. One thing that can be kind of hard here to see is if this second line, the middle line, is actually centered with them. So this is just a separate tip. I'm going to use the V key for Victor to disable the first and the second line of white there. So I can move the middle one maybe up a little bit more. And just pressing the V key disables a track. So, and that's what you can see, how these two videos are grayed out because they are disabled. So if you ever run into that, you might have accidentally disabled something. Just select them and press the V key to re-enable those clips. And now I have them all positioned correctly. I just don't have them extended. So I'm just going to go up and undo the crop for the right side to extend that one out. And I'll do the same thing for this one, right, to extend it out. Obviously, you can see how this is a little bit of work, but once you get used to doing this, it actually is pretty quick to create this type of a title. So the next thing is, let's see, I got a comment here. Is there any way to... Yes. So Steve asked in the chat here, is there any way to annotate like an arrow or add any line to emphasize the text? And yeah, any of this stuff, you can certainly add additional images and items around to really emphasize things. And I'll show you one trick here just for annotation's sake in just a minute. Let me just wrap this part up because we're almost done with this part. Because the next thing I want to show is actually making the animations happen. And that we're just going to do, you can do a couple ways for moving things around, but if you want to animate, one way to do it is to animate the crop parameter. But what I'm first going to do is select all of these clips, and I'm going to go up to the clip menu. Is it clip? I think it's edits. And there's an option to make it a new compound clip, which I usually use Option D. Let me find it, though. I want to know where it is. New compound clip. It's under File. Oh, that's right. Yeah, so File, New Compound Clip. I love compound clips. We'll call this our title for short here. And so what this does, what this compound clip allows us to do is group everything together so it's not a lot neater on the timeline. It looks a lot better. Now I can just double click on this. It opens it up to be able to see all of those. And we're going to animate these. So I'm just going to animate the position to move them from the left side of the screen over to the right side. Right? So I'm going to set the beginning. I'm going to move the playhead to the beginning of this clip. I'm going to add a keyframe for the position, and I'm going to move it in probably about a second. These are all pretty quick videos, so we'll have it take 1 second for everything to move over. Move it over right about there. Automatically added the keyframe, so now if we watch this, they all swing over. I'm going to use the back arrow to go out of the compound clip, and if we watch that, looks really nice. But as you can see, we can see on the left side here the space where everything's coming over from the end. So with this compound clip created, we can actually crop all that so that we don't see it. So with this video, with the compound clip selected, I'm going to crop the, crop the left side, And I'm going to crop it right over to that point. And now notice how it's coming out from the side. So I can see it's coming right like that, right? And if I double click on the clip, go back into the compound clip, I'm going to move line 2 down a little bit. We'll move line 3 down. And just snapping a bit here. Notice everything's cut off at the end. I'm actually going to extend all these so that they all leave at the same time. And this is all fine-tuning that title. We now need to extend the compound clip. But now if I play it, here we see line 1 comes out, line 2's there, and then line 3 ends it. So that's the way you can create that compound clips there in those titles. You could certainly go in here with any of the colors and make changes to it, make changes to the lines of text, all of that good stuff. And then to answer Steve's question, hopefully here, is the way of like annotating stuff that's on the screen. That gets more into creating more advanced titles, and I would recommend looking at Motion for that, using the Motion application. But certainly you can go in with any of the shapes or generators that are in here to annotate. The other thing that I think a lot of people overlook, and I forget if it was today's Motion shortcut, but if you add a title in, and we go up to the actual text here, you can go up to the edit menu and go down to the emoji and symbols viewer here to bring up the emojis and the symbols, and you can add in any of these emojis as a way to add in or basically add these shapes and add these things as text into your project. So obviously the emojis are a lot of times goofy, but they do have arrows and some things that you could use here. But if you go to the symbols, which again, just at the bottom here, if you didn't see that, there's a little more button here that I can go over to the symbols. In the symbols section, they do have a lot of additional shapes and arrows and things that you can go and put in. They even have a whole set of dominoes now. I did not know that. But all kinds of things in here. So if I wanted to use like this arrow pointing shape, it should let me add that in. If it doesn't, this may be a motion only thing, which would be unfortunate. Hopefully they bring that here. Let's try just doing a triangle. Yeah, it looks like it's not adding that in, so you probably can't do the emoji directly here in Final Cut. You probably have to do that in inside of Motion, which again, kind of annoying, but something that as far as Motion goes, it's a great way of using that that application. I forget if there was an arrow generator in Shapes. I think Shapes was just standard shapes. No, they did have an arrow. Yeah, they do have an arrow. So this is under generators, there's the shapes generator. And the shapes, any generator, or at least most of them, as far as I know, when you select it, you have all these options in the inspector to change. So you can change the shape to arrow, and that gives you an option to have an arrow on here. And we can adjust what the arrow looks like with the controls there. So maybe you want an outline color, different color to make it stand out, or no outline. You can certainly make adjustments in there for that. And then with the arrow, you could go through with our transform tool, or using the video inspector. A lot of times with this, when you're annotating, you're trying to point something out, maybe on the train here, we could go and move that and adjust where that is and where that's actually being shown. In this case, though, I'd probably go to the video inspector and scale this down. Maybe want to point at something. And this then, too, with any of these arrows that I'm seeing here, you could go on and keyframe this to move it, meaning move the playhead where you want to start the arrow. So if I know I want it to be pointed right there, I can add a keyframe to the position, which is this little diamond button next to the position parameter, or any of these. I'm just doing the position here. And then move your playhead somewhere else. We're going to go to the beginning. I'm going to move it way over here. And notice we get this line, because of the keyframe, it's added another keyframe. That's why we can see this these gold dots here. So now if I drag this over, we can see there's the arrow flying in to point at an item on the screen there. I think it even did a little rotation. No, just the two there. Cool. So that's one way you can do annotation and bring a little bit of that in. But honestly, those kind of things, even this title that I did, that was a lot of work for Final Cut to do that. in my opinion, I mean, it's something that in Motion, you can build your templates and build your stuff there. Motion's a $50 application from the App Store. You can get a link on it from my website, anawesomeguide.com as well to see that one. And I have some videos on Motion, but if we want, we can definitely go in more detail for that. Cool. So that answers the question of how to create that slide over text. Obviously, a very simple as far as small question, but there's a lot of steps to create that slide over text. The one thing I also wanted to point it out, and another reason for creating this compound clip, is the compound clip is a saved clip here in the browser. So you see a couple days ago, I was testing this out and adding the different layers. But now we have the compound clip here of those 3 lines of text created. And with that clip selected, I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to say Duplicate Clip. Here we get a second one, and now I can add this on a little bit later in my project because we want to have the text come on again in a second spot of the project. So I can see there's my second lines of text, and I can go in, double-click on these to open up the layers, maybe select line 3 here, and using the inspector, I could go through and change this and put in whatever text I'm going to put in, make the adjustments, and now I've made that adjustment to that text layer. You have to make sure, though, that you duplicate the clip up here. If you don't do that, the change that we made to the first clip or the second clip here would also change the first clip. So make sure you are duplicating those title clips. Okay, next question. I'm trying to figure out how to consolidate and trim away unwanted media. My understanding is the best way to go about this and free up my hard drive would be to go through projects, mark all of the clips I want to keep as favorite, and then drop those into a project and export that as ProRes. Put that in my archives and throw out the originals. So that is, when I read this the first time, I could kind of follow what was happening here. But yes, the way that you're doing it by marking the clips, basically what this person is doing is they're going through their project and their clips, and they're saying, okay, I want this clip, so I'm going to hit the F key on the keyboard, mark it as a favorite. I don't want this one. I want this one. They're marking it as a favorite, right? Pressing the F key. After they've done that, then what they do is they export all of those clips. They put them into a project, and then they export them. And you could certainly do that. That's going to save just the clips that you put onto the timeline. But another way to do this, though, I'm going to make a new project. I'm just going to call this a tests in my museum's spot. So another way to do it is you could have an entire project that you've created. Actually, let me back up. Let me go back to my rivers here. So this is my rivers project, right? So I could actually go up to File. I'm trying to think of the best way to save steps. But essentially, what this person is trying to do is say you have this project with all these river clips, and this is my stock library that has all kinds of different things in it. I mean, there's clips that are cookies and all kinds of random stuff here. So they're trying to figure out how can they save just the footage that they've used in this project and delete everything else. So you can certainly go down and mark the clips you want as favorite and kind of manually mark the stuff that you want. But if you've edited a project and you want to make sure to archive this and keep just these clips, all you have to do is with this project selected, go up to the File menu, and what do we want? Edits. No, I think we want File. And there's an option here under, where is it? Here we go. There's an option here that says Copy Project to Library. You could also move it, but we want to keep it in the stock library. But there's an option here, so you're going to say copy this project to a new library, right? And what this is going to do, I'm going to call this the clips I want to save. Side note, always name your stuff. If you've watched any of my stuff, I recommend naming. It lets us know, do we want to copy, optimize, and proxy media? You can always regenerate that stuff later. So I'm just going to say OK to move or copy just the clips that I want. So what's happening here is instead of marking the clips you want and doing it, if they're already in a project, just go ahead and copy that project over. Now, look at this clips I want to project or want to save project, or sorry, library. This library, if I scroll through it, just has all of the still images and those 2 titles that I've added to this project, and that's it. So again, we selected the project and I copied it to this new library. I could certainly go back to my stock library and say I want another project. I could select it and go up to the file menu and say move or copy this one to the clips I want to save. Say OK, and it'll also add those clips as well. So now by doing that, you can then go through and you could delete the entire stock library if you wanted to. If you don't need any of those other clips, you could just go through and delete that, and you've still saved the Rivers project and this other follow project. You've saved those projects and all the clips that are in them, and you're saving the originals. You're not trimming them. You're not losing any media by doing that. So that's the way that I would recommend doing that. Otherwise, if you want to be more manual, if you haven't gone through and built a project yet, you could certainly go into your library, and when you're looking at all of your clips, you could select a clip and mark it as favorite or rejected, and then delete what you don't want through there. So hopefully that answered that one. And our next question here is that Steve tried to use the Censor feature as shown in the Censor tutorial posted at the beginning of September to the Final Cut Pro Help YouTube channel. And unfortunately, what he wants to cover or censor is like a very small strip, and the Censor doesn't have an option to cover a small strip. So this was a really good question, and I wish I had covered this in my Censor YouTube channel, because this is a really great question. So in this train video, which we'll use as an example, and actually what Steve was trying to do, he had a video with something, and it had a number on it that he wanted to blur out. And this is very common. You might have a document someone's showing and you want to censor a phone number or some other data that's on there. And that's where the Censor, that's what the Censor filter is designed to do, is to block and censor information. Unfortunately, it's more designed to censor faces. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to blur out the information that's on the front of this train, just these 3 letters in the middle, the L, the D, and the H, because this is very similar to what some people want to do. So with the Censor effect selected in the effects browser, and again, you can watch the Censor video to get more information on this one specifically, but with the Censor selected, I can go up here and change the amount of the Censor. I can change the radius to make it really small if I wanted to. But notice if I move the Censor, let me change the type of the Censor here just to make it clearer. Just this little black bar. So I can move this up to those 3 letters, right? I'm going to take the radius, we'll take it way down to cover up just those letters. I'm going to use my browser here. I'm going to zoom in to, let's say like 400 just so we can get really nice and close here. And right, I can put the Censor around the letters there, and it looks pretty good, right? I could go up here and censor it or blur it out. But notice we'll change the amount way down here. Make it like a 2, 3. But it's this circle, right? It's covering up maybe some of the top here, some of the bottom. Not what I want to do. I want to cover just the letters. So here's what you're going to do. Instead of using the radius and what's built into the Censor filter here, just take that radius way up. Take it way up. It can cover as much of the frame as you want. In the example that Steve was doing, I just had him fill the entire screen, right? So just fill the entire screen. Everything's blurred out. Everything's censored. And then on the Censor itself, over on the right side here, when you hover over the name of the effect, you get this option to mask the Censor. So we're actually going to apply a mask. I'm going to use a shape mask. And here's my shape mask. And now I can mask out just a section on the screen. And I'm going to zoom back in here to make this easier to see. Try 200. No, we got to go way closer here. We'll go 400. There's a little box here, too. You can navigate around what you're seeing. So I'm going to go right up to the top of the train here. I'm I'm going to use the white circle here on the left to make this more of a square because we don't need it to be a circle. And I'm going to drag this square around just the information on the front of the train. And when you're doing this too, just change the method, or sorry, just change the amount down to 0. Because now you can just use this little box as a way to adjust everything. So I can actually see this is on an angle, so I'll angle it, take the box just around what I want to blur. And then the outside box, we're going to drag that way down because that's the feather. That's the feather effect of this blur, so we don't need much of a feather. And I'm going to go back and change the amount back up, maybe like 2 or 3. Again, drag the feather way in close. And that's pretty rough, but pretty quick and good. So now you can see by using this mask around the censor effect, I'm able to blur out just a specific section of, in this case, the front of the train, instead of blurring out all this extra space. And this is something that's very specific to the censor here that we use. But Steve recommended or suggested, he said he doesn't really like the censor, or he didn't say the censor necessarily, but he said he likes to use the Gaussian blur, which that's totally cool. I am a big fan of the Gaussian blur, have been for almost since I started editing, which is this Gaussian blur here. So I'm going to apply this effect to the train, blurs out the entire train. We can do the exact same thing then. We can go up and add a shape mask. I'm going to do Shift-Z to zoom out here. And we can do the same thing, just make this square. I know I'm going to bring in the feather, so I'll bring that way in. And now we can use the Gaussian blur effect instead of the using the censor, which again the censor is putting on a different type of blur compared to what the Gaussian blur is. So if you know you like a specific style of blur as your censor, by all means go for it. These shape masks can be applied to and useful on just about any effect that's there in Final Cut. So don't hesitate. You can certainly use this as a way to use a different blur effect to censor something as well. Cool. So that is how to use the censor and maybe censor something that's smaller than what the built-in sizes are. All right, next question. I'm having issues with connecting my YouTube to Final Cut Pro 10. Ever since my trial ended and the full version was purchased, it's not letting me upload my videos to YouTube. And essentially what this person means is when they go to the share menu and they go down and select YouTube, they're not able to complete the share. So personally, as far as I've seen, it's very rare to have an issue after you've finished the trial version. If you don't know, Apple offers a free 30-day trial of Final Cut Pro 10, so you can try it out, at least as of the posting of this video, as the recording. But usually, I mean, it is still a full version. Unlike many trials where you get maybe a limited version of the application to try, and it doesn't have all the features, the Final Cut trial, as far as I know, is basically the full version. It's just after 30 days, you can't open it, you can't use it. So when you go and buy it, it usually just replaces the one that's there and lets you unlock it. So there is an article, an Apple support article, let me bring it up, that kind of addresses this specific issue. And in most cases, if you're having issues, I recommend that you check for the issue. It's probably not related to the trial, but it's always good to look at those things. So there is an article. The article number is HT 205334. So I'm just on apple.com searching their support. Looks like it doesn't come up there, so we're just going to do a Google search. Apple support HT 205334. There we go. And it's called If You Can't Sign In and Share to YouTube, which is exactly the problem that you're having here. So usually this is the reason. If you're not able to share, a lot of times the sharing capability is not just to YouTube but to other sources as well. You have to be on specific versions because either they update something like YouTube does and it starts working again, or older versions of Final Cut can't connect to the newer versions. There's just some disconnect, and that's usually the case. So Apple, as far as recommending things, says make sure you're on a later version, this version or later. In this case, Final Cut 10.2.2. If you don't know what version you're on, just go up to the menu bar, click on Final Cut Pro, and choose About Final Cut Pro. And you'll see what version you're on, which I'm on the current release as of right now, which is version 10.4.3. So that's how you can see what version you're on. And then if you need to update, just go into the App Store and you can get your app updated. The other article that I will suggest looking at for any issue, not just the one that we're talking about here with YouTube, but is HT203477. Let's try just searching that number to see if it comes up. It does. And that's this long, lengthy article called Resolve an Issue in Final Cut Pro 10. I've made a video on this as well, just taking you through all of these steps. But go through these steps because these will let you not only troubleshoot and possibly fix the issue. The first step, restart your Mac. That should be the first thing you do almost anytime you have a problem. That may fix the issue. But some of these steps, like if you go down here, it says to try using another user account. And this will take you through the steps of creating another user account on your Mac. That won't necessarily fix the issue. You might know that it works in another user account, but it doesn't fix your account. But it'll at least help you in identifying where the problem is. If you go through all of these steps that are here and it's still not working, having the information and how you went through these steps is very helpful. And you can certainly reach out to myself or someone else and ask for assistance. But the fact that you've gone through these steps will be able to help you and a lot better, a lot faster. So finalcutprohelp@me.com is my email. If you're still having issues, you can definitely do that. As far as the YouTube thing, not only you have had this issue recently, a lot of people had it. I believe whatever problem was happening got fixed. But it may just be an issue with your specific YouTube account. So I would check, see if maybe iMovie, if you can do it through iMovie. Some people I saw had an issue both in iMovie and Final Cut. It wouldn't let them log in. But if it seems to be your account, maybe someone else can sign in and it works. I'd reach out to YouTube in that case or Google YouTube support and see if they can get you back up and running. Cool. So these pages we're done with. Now we'll move on to the next question. We're on question 7 of. We'll see how far it goes. I have like 12 questions on here, so I'm gonna get a long one here. But yeah, this will be question 7. I'm new to Final Cut Pro. What do the diagonal lines over the video means? This is a great question. So if you select some clips like we did earlier, and you control click on them and you say do compound clip, you want to make a compound clip, call it river clip. Here's our clip, right? If we double click on the clip to go into it, to open the clip up, we're looking at what's inside that clip. And we can see over here on the right side and the left side, these are the diagonal lines this person is talking about. So I can just hit the arrow at the top next to river clips of the timeline. And I can hit this back arrow to go outside of that compound clip. And maybe I trim the compound clip down a little bit. Now if I go back into the compound clip, I can see here's the diagonal lines over those clips. So the diagonal lines just mean that those clips are part of either a compound clip or possibly a multicam clip, but they're not visible in your project. So if you go back, this is your main project, we're not going to see those clips because they're cut out. So you can certainly just extend the clip, the compound clip, and now if you double click on it, those clips are no longer in the cutoff area or the kind of the dead space that's there. So diagonal line just means you're outside of the normal area of either a synced clip, a compound clip, or a multicam clip, some other kind of grouped clip. All right, next person starts out, so confused. I'm trying to do a very basic thing. They want to set some clips to be 1.6 seconds long. What do the last 2 digits of the 8-digit count in? So what they're talking about is the time code in the middle. And looking at our still clips here, essentially what they're wanting to do is take a clip, like we'll take this little rock pile here. They want to make this clip, or all the clips there, 1.6 seconds. So you have an option where you can go up, I believe it's under the edit menu, and there's an option to change the duration. Is it? It's probably right in front of my face somewhere in there. I always like the help menu. I just type in what I need to find. In this case, duration. I'm looking for change duration. There we go. It's under modify, change duration. I always do the shortcut. I always do Control D. But yeah, essentially they're trying to change the duration. So when they do that, it puts the time code right here in the middle. And we can see it's 00000400. And this person wanted to make the clip 1.6 seconds. So you're going to have to do a little bit of math there depending on the time that you're working in. But essentially, it starts out with hours, minutes, seconds, and then frames. So our project here goes a certain amount of frames. So if I am on the project here and I use the right arrow, right now I can see I'm at 44 seconds and 20 frames. I push the right arrow, we move one frame at a time. So each frame it moves over, and this is a 23 frame project. So the frame rate is probably 23.98 frames per second. So after 23, we're at 44 seconds and 23 frames. The next frame is the start of a new second there. So now we're at 45 seconds and 00 frames. So this person wants to go to 1.6 seconds. So we'd have to do, like, let's say roughly we're at 24 frames, right? So times 0.6, we get 14.4. So essentially what I would want to do is select a clip then, Control D, and I could do, 1.14. So I'm doing 1.14, we'll say. So right, I'm doing Command Space here to bring up Spotlight. I always use Spotlight for my little calculator here. So they wanted to do 0.6 seconds. I'm timing it by 0.6, I believe is the right math. So 14.4. So here we got 1.14, and I'm going to hit return, and that's probably roughly 1.6 seconds. Changes in. So the last number there is just your frames per second. So hopefully that answers that one. Next one is from Richie on Twitter, reached out and said, I have edited a video on Final Cut Pro 10 on my Mac, and I'm not too sure how to export the video onto Twitter. Can you help? And that's a great question, because you don't, in the share menu, you don't have an option to share to Twitter in the same way that you can share to Facebook or YouTube. You can certainly go into your preferences, and there's a destinations section here, and you can look through all the destinations, but there's not one. You have YouTube video, Facebook, and some of the other streaming services there, but you don't have one for Twitter. So you either have to, use the correct export settings and export the video yourself, which Twitter has a whole support article on their Twitter page. Let me actually bring it up here so you can see it, with all the settings that they recommend using. And this is one way you can go in and do it and figure things out. Let me pull this over here. So this is Twitter's support page, and you can just do a search on their site, how to share and watch videos on Twitter. And if you go down, I believe they have under the frequently asked section here, like what are limitations to video resolution and aspect ratio? So these are just letting you know what some of the settings are that you have to abide by. So what video formats do you support? They support MP4 and MOV video. And there's formats on mobile for their mobile apps. And they have the size and the length, all the rules that you have to follow. So you can certainly use that as a way to go in and find out what the requirements are. And then when you go up here to share the project, you can share it as maybe an Apple Devices one to get out, or send it out as a master file to save it. You have a lot of different options for how you export those videos. You can also get the compressor application. Compressor is also a $49 application, very similar to Motion, available from the App Store through Apple, or you can get the link on my website, anawesomeguide.com. And Compressor allows you to create a lot more sophisticated export settings. Great way to use it. Also a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. So if you don't want to work for this and you want the easiest way to share to Twitter, what I've found is on the App Store, you just have to go up and do a search here. On the App Store, there's an app called, at least I think it was on the App Store. Now that I say it, it might not be. Yeah, actually, this one I think is from the website. So on the internet, just do Safari, we're going to go over to and get an app that's called Video Tweet. And is it up here? No. And it's from the website arcticwhiteness.com. But Arctic Whiteness has created an app called Video Tweet. And Video Tweet is a free app. I would recommend purchasing it if you do like it. If you don't purchase it, it adds a kind of like a watermark. It adds a hashtag to your videos. But you can see what it does here. It actually puts in a share option. So if I'm done with my videos using Arctic Whiteness's app, Video Tweet, in your share menu, you'll get an option to tweet that out. I don't think, I might not have added it to this account. That's okay. You get the idea. You'll get this share option here that says Video Tweet, and then you can essentially send that right up to your Twitter, all directly in Final Cut, and send that out. And I believe on here, this Video Tweet hashtag and some of that information is added to the tweet when you send it up if you don't purchase it. But if you do purchase it, I think it's like what, $5? It's cheap. I'd recommend supporting these guys and these developers if it's something you use, because it's a nice function to get added to Final Cut. Okay, so next question, question 10. We got Jeremy on Twitter asked, and it was a little confusing exactly how he's asking it, but he asked, how stable is Mojave for a CMP 5.1, which I believe is a Mac Pro that he's running Final Cut Pro 10 and Motion. I recently upgraded to High Sierra, and it's good, but is there any reason to upgrade? Thanks. So this is a great question, especially right now, because macOS Mojave just came out, and that's what we've been running this entire stream on. And you can be the guide of this. Let me search through. Yeah, look, I'm looking on the YouTube stream's health. It looks like it stayed connected the whole time. I had to force quit Final Cut once during this stream because it kind of locked up when I went into a multicam clip and pasted that clip. I don't know if that was a Mojave issue, but just to kind of be clear with that, I've been using it since day one, since the 24th when it came out about a week ago, and I've only had a couple very small issues with Mojave where, like, once I went up to the menu bar and the menu bar didn't come down. Like, I've had really small issues like that, but nothing that's been major. So I like Mojave. I think it's fine. I don't have any issues with it. However, it is version 10.14.0. Like, it's the first version. So it's kind of expected that there are going to be issues that come up when you have a first major release like this. With that said, I think Apple's doing a really good job in creating their software and making these first versions much more stable than they have in the past in other versions that I've seen. And the changes in Mojave are not that drastic. So there's also not really a major reason for you to upgrade right away. If you're on High Sierra and everything's running great, I would say stay in High Sierra and wait for maybe 10.14.1. But the other big thing that you have to worry about is not so much Final Cut Pro, right? Final Cut Pro is designed and developed by Apple. So most likely the major issues are not going to be directly with Final Cut. They're going to be in things like the plugin that I just showed, the Video Tweet plugin, or other plugins that you have maybe from FX Factory Pro. If you have all these other third-party that are not Apple developed, these other applications, that's a lot of times where you have maybe one single person who's developing an entire app, and it can be a lot harder for them to get it updated in time for these releases. So take a look at all of the applications that you have before updating, and check and see if they are compatible. Then don't just upgrade to 10.14. Maybe make a new partition on your hard drive, install it on a different computer if you have one, but don't erase your current one. If everything's working correctly, keep that working, and then create a new test area where you can open up the new version, test it out, and see if everything's working for you for a week or so before you fully upgrade your normal machine. But he's asking, how stable is Mojave? I think it's very stable. Should you upgrade? Probably not. If you just upgraded to High Sierra, use that for a while. I don't think the features are huge or a major reason to upgrade. With that said, the one feature I really like of Mojave, just because I like to show things off if I can, is in system preferences. One of the biggest and their key features that they've added is they've added this dark mode. So you have a light and you have a dark mode, which if I click on dark, hopefully it doesn't break everything in the stream. But notice everything went dark. The menu bars, the applications go dark. If I go back to light, all this stuff goes back to light. Even the background changes to dark, which I think is cool. Which for me and for you probably as well, if you're used to Final Cut, these pro apps use a really dark interface. So having the rest of the operating system and all of your other apps also be dark, I find is very helpful and very pleasing to the eye. It did take me probably 2 or 3 days to get used to the dark interface, though. The way it shadows things and the way windows are differentiated is very different compared to the light mode. So initially for me, it looked like things were stacked on top of each other weird, and it wasn't clear where I was supposed to click on things. And if you think that right away, don't just switch back. I would say stick with it for a couple days. Because I got used to it, but it did take a couple days of using all my different apps to understand how the dark mode works. But I do really like it, and I think that's a great feature and a reason to update. Okay, Jim on Twitter messaged me with an issue. He said, quote, I shot a short film in 4K. I've edited it in both an HD and 4K timeline. The project is 12 seconds and 10 frames longer as a 4K project than it is as an HD one. I'm just wondering why it would happen. I edited the 4K video as an HD file and then created a new 4K timeline and just copy and pasted it into it. I don't know where the extra 12 seconds and 10 frames came from. All of the specs are 2398 frames per second. And they're all the same. So with this one, I replied to Jim and I said, instead of creating a new timeline, because essentially what he was going up to is saying file, new project. He's creating a new project or new timeline. Instead of doing that, just take your current project and duplicate it. Then use the inspector to modify the project settings from 1080 to 4K. So as an example, this is our Rivers project. So in the timeline, I'm going to go up to the top here and go down. Here we got Rivers. So instead of copying the clips and pasting them into a new project and a new timeline where things may look very different, I'm going to just, with this one, I'm going to select this project. I'm going to go up to my edit button. I'm going to duplicate it. And again, I like always using duplicate as snapshot. But I'm going to duplicate it as a snapshot. We're going to get our second Rivers option. And then right now this was a 720 project. I'll just hit modify and I can change the video format. Maybe I want to make this one the 4K. So I'll make it 4K. The resolution is fine. The frame rate's fine. Hit OK. And boom. We have a 1 minute and 13 second video and 14 frames. Now we know that that's frames. And both of these projects are identical in length and time. So that's what I said. I said, you know, just go up and duplicate it instead of copying and pasting it. And Jim said, yeah, that fixed it. So confused him, but that's why you just don't want to be copying and pasting if you're just trying to create the, you know, copy the whole project. Don't copy it, just duplicate the project. Saves you a lot of time there. All right. Question 12. Yeah, this is the last question. All right. So this one says, I hired someone to create a closed caption file for my project, but I can't figure out how to apply them. Can you help? All right, so first thing, what are captions, right? So Let me go and grab the file, because I have some test files for this. And I've been working a lot recently with people that have been using captions, because it is a newer feature, roughly, comparatively, about a year old now. But being able to create captions in Final Cut is a newer feature, but it's also one that I strongly recommend that you do, because captions allow people with disabilities that can't hear well be able to follow along what you're seeing, but it also helps all these people that are maybe watching this TVs with the volume down. They can still read the captions and follow along. A lot of times I'm in very loud areas where I cannot hear what's going on. So having a caption track on it is extremely helpful for those times. So those are the captions. That's what you're seeing at the bottom of your videos. And essentially, if someone sends you a caption file, they've created one for you. There are many, many different formats that captions can be put into. So you can have captions that are in a standard file type and import them right into other applications without a problem. But then there may be an issue with the format that you're trying to use and open up. So let me search here. I'm just searching for Final Cut Pro captions. Here we go, using captions in Final Cut Pro 10.1. This will just give you an idea of what these things look like. And specifically, I want you to notice this first line in here. So it says you can create and deliver your video with captions in the ITT or iTunes Time Text format or the CEA 608 format. Those are the two formats that Final Cut supports. So if we're in a project, which I have a captions project up here somewhere, use captions 1 is fine. I can click on captions and I can see them there. I can go up to view, show captions, and view English. Yeah, English is there. We'll go up to the edit menu, go down to captions. You can add captions, edit them. I've done whole videos on them. And you can also go under file and you can import captions. So the first thing is, if your captions are not in a CEA 608 or an ITT format, you'll need to get those converted, right? So you're going to need to convert those captions. And unfortunately, right now, Final Cut and Compressor, all of these applications don't have built-in ways of converting other formats. You have to have them in the correct format. So let me bring out a file here. I'm just going to put it on the desktop. So this is one thing that I've seen happen. This captions file that I downloaded from, or just copied over from the desktop, this file is not going to work. And the reason is it has this .txt extension on it. So if I go to File, Import, Captions, I look at the desktop, it's grayed out. I can't do it. And that's just because it added this .txt extension to it. So I'm just going to select it and hit delete and click outside of it. And let's see if it updates here. Still can't do it. Let me select Command I, going to get information about the file. I can still see it's .txt for the extension. So I got to get rid of that. That's the most common thing that I see. And you'll get this message, are you sure you want to change it? Yes, we want to use ITT. You'll also have the CEA format will have a slightly different extension as well. But now if I click off of the desktop and back on it, here we have a captions file. I can import it. It'll bring in that file. And yeah, it's fine. It's beyond the duration. These aren't for this specific project, but they're brought in the captions. It has them. So that's the most common thing. If you're getting the correct format, if this person is sending you the CEA 608 format or an ITT format, check and make sure it didn't add on the TXT extension automatically, because that's what's happened to me. And every single time that I've had that issue, it's been that the TXT extension was added. The other thing, though, is if it's in the wrong format, you're not going to be able to import it regardless of what you change there. So there are a bunch of tools. You can just do a web search for, in this case I said convert captions. And one I've used here is this Go transcript. I think this is the one I used. Yeah, this is a tool I used on a couple things. And this lets you upload a file. You can select a format you want to convert it to, and then you can convert it. So if you have a file that's not in the correct format, this is certainly a way that you can do that. So I'm just going to upload that captions bad file. I can see it's .itt. And if I need a different format for some reason, I can select it here. Yeah, and switch that over. So let's say I want to convert it to subrip. That's fine. We'll hit convert. This thing goes in and converts it, and then it's going to give us a file, downloads it to the downloads folder, and piece of cake, it's done. But notice, I'm going to put that file on the desktop as well. Notice, same thing happened. It was originally a .itt, got converted to .srt, but for whatever reason, the computer added the .txt extension. So again, same thing. I'm going to have this file. I'm going to do Command-I to get information about it. Under name and extension, I'm going to delete the .txt. I'm going to close the information window. It says, are you sure you want to change it? Yes, we want to change it to use SRT. Now I have a .srt captions file. And I don't, is that the other one? Yeah, that one's not one that's compatible with Final Cut. It's not an ITT one, but cool. But that's working with your captions and getting it. Most likely you just don't have it converted into the right file there to be able to import that and bring that in to Final Cut. So that is the Q&A. I don't see any other questions in the chat here, so let's switch back over to our Keynote and finish this out. That was a long Q&A there, so thank you so much for hanging in there. But continue to send in your questions that you have, because that's what builds the content for this, and that determines what I do going forward on the website and all of the other things we do here on the YouTube channel. September was a busy month. Every single day of September, a new video was posted. You can watch all of those right now on the YouTube channel. They answer all kinds of various questions, starting from installation of Final Cut to things like captions and effects and tools, all of the fun stuff. Some additional resources, though, that are out there. I always cover these things. Don't look over that help menu. I used it multiple times in this video to search for just menu bar items, but the help menu is extremely detailed. You can go in and see the built-in user manual. There's all kinds of great resources and content in that help menu, so don't forget to check things out there. You can also go, if you're getting started, an awesome guide to Final Cut Pro 10 is available on the various digital bookstores like Barnes & Noble, the iTunes, Apple Bookstore, Kindle devices. You can get it through the Nook or get it physically. You can buy a print version on Amazon. That book is out there. It is for version 10.3, so some of the newer features like captions are not included in that version, but you'll still learn a lot. And if you get stuck on something in that, just send me an email, or you can tweet at me using @FinalCutProHelp. You can do that on Twitter. If you follow on Instagram, we've been posting a daily shortcut, all kinds of great tips on there that you can follow along with. We recently passed 1,000 people following, which is awesome, but we want more people to get those tips, so make sure to follow along there. If you have to use Facebook, you can also do that. We got a little Facebook section, so you can always reach out there as well, but Instagram and Twitter is a lot faster usually. But the best way is just sending me an email, finalcutprohelp@me.com. You can include your screenshots, even videos, and other information that would help me answer your questions if you have them. And you can always go to anawesomeguide.com. I don't post a lot of content on there, but I do try to get articles and other information up there. And you can see, like I did earlier, the adjustment layer download is on there. And you can also catch up on a lot of the shortcut options. You can use that, bookmark that as a way to search for specific shortcuts. It's a great way to do that. And then, like I mentioned earlier and throughout the stream, Frame.io, they're not a sponsor. I'm not being paid for this. I'm just saying that they have a great tool that they've created, and you can use this link to get a 30-day free trial of one of their paid accounts. And Frame.io lets you share projects and clips and other information with other people very easily. Before I used this, I was essentially posting videos to YouTube, maybe as an unlisted video or as a private video, and sharing it to other people as a way to get reviews. But this is very integrated into Final Cut Pro, and you'll find that this is an amazing way to work with things. It allows you, like I said, to bring markers of notes directly from the tool in. So there's some really cool features about it, but just use that link, r.frame.io/M capital R VC capital V $C. If you use that specific link, which is also in the description of this video, that'll get you that 30-day trial. Also helps me out in getting a bonus if you end up paying for that. So that's my referral link. So that helps out, but specifically gives you a 30-day trial, which is longer than you would get elsewhere. Cool. So this has been episode 7 of Final Cut Pro Help Live. Please leave a comment with any topic or questions that you have, topics you want covered. It's a really great way for me to figure out what you want to see next. And don't forget to like the video, and any videos that you watch on this channel, make sure to like them. That lets me know the ones that you do like. And if you want, comment on those as well. I try to reply to every comment, and it helps us improve the content that we make here as well. Otherwise, I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.